Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, answering the question, is digital transformation relevant for credit unions and community banks? My name's Kayla. I handle marketing initiatives here at Nividus, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Our speaker today is Alan Hester, president of Nividus. And before we begin, I just want to go over some quick guidelines. So if you have any trouble with the audio or video, please just use the chat window on the side of the control panel. You can also use the question window, which is a separate window, to share your questions related to the webinar itself. Please feel free to ask those questions whenever you feel like it. We're going to spend some time at the end of the session addressing them. And if we don't get the chance, we'll definitely get back to you via email. We're also going to be sending out a recording of this session, and the same recording will be available on our website for download. So I want to open today's session with a brief intro of Nividus. Founded in 2011, our aim is to help businesses work at their peak efficiency and succeed with their digital transformation goals with our intelligent automation platform. We offer vertical solutions to help empower companies to operate with agility and flexibility. And one of the key differentiators of our platform is that RPA, AI, and BPM capabilities are natively developed within the platform. And this key differentiator has enabled us to help our customers meet their overall end-to-end automation needs. I'm now going to hand it over to our speaker, Alan, who's going to dive deeper into our topic for today.
All right. Thanks, Kayla. So today, as Kayla mentioned, we're going to talk about digital transformation, specifically in credit unions and community banks or smaller banks. I think many of the larger banks and financial services institutions are maybe a little bit further down this curve in terms of implementing these kinds of solutions. And I think part of the downside for smaller banks up till now has really been the cost and complexity of implementing these kinds of solutions. And so I think in a lot of cases, smaller banks think, well, you know, we'd love to be able to do that kind of thing, but it really, you know, we can't afford to do that. We don't have the time, we don't have the right expertise. And so we're going to talk about some of that today. But before we get to that, let's just talk about what is some of the driving reasons why you might want to consider digital transformation. What are some of the challenges that you're facing today? Obviously, in banking and financial services in general, there's a lot of regulatory compliance issues in a lot of different ways. And so that can involve a lot of manual processes and a lot of time wasted from your human staff to be able to deal with those. Also, you're often dealing with a bunch of complicated systems that sometimes are really old. They might be homegrown systems, or they might be systems that you acquired a long time ago, and maybe there aren't very many people around who know much about how they work under the hood. So anytime you need something changed or you decide to do something differently, it becomes a complicated process to figure out how you can work with those systems. And yet, you know, that's where all your core data is in some cases, or maybe it's completing some critical functionality, and so there's no way to replace that. So you have to continue working with that system. You also have that same kind of issue from a data standpoint, right? Data can be locked away in those legacy systems or in other systems that you don't have good access to, or sometimes the data is not in any system at all. You know, sometimes it's all transactional and not stored anywhere. So, you know, a lot of those kinds of data then are not available for reporting. And that makes it so that it can be difficult to be able to analyze your end-to-end processes and find out where there are holdups or delays and make improvements based on that. The other thing that's becoming more and more challenging over time is that customer expectations are getting so high, right? We have down here mobile first, but it's really any platform. A customer wants to be able to do any kind of transaction with you or communication with you on any platform that they want to, and they want to be able to seamlessly switch back and forth. And so from a technology standpoint, that can be very, very challenging. So the result of these kinds of things, if you try to keep up with it, this leads to high costs, sometimes inaccurate results. You don't really get to adapt and scale that you want to, and you just aren't able to make the kind of progress that you want to make as a company when you're just doing all of these things in a highly manual way all the time. So digital transformation, then, I know it means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but really it's just talking about how you can leverage technology to change your business in a way that you would not be able to accomplish without it, right? So all of these manual processes that we're talking about, the only way that you can keep those things going, and a lot of times we call those kinds of tasks technical debt, right? Because they're the kinds of things that you have to keep doing because it is required to continue your business operating and keep the revenue flowing. But it consumes a lot of your human capital to do it. And so if you're looking to do big transformation initiatives outside of that, the only way to do that is by adding a lot more people to enable it without digital transformation. So digital transformation is talking about how you can leverage technology to kind of fill in that gap where you don't really have the people, or you don't have the ability to add more people, so that you can accomplish those kinds of breakthrough innovations or improvements to how you work. So, I mean, this is very simplistic, but really it could be summed up more easily than this. I'd say just about any company out there should be looking at digital transformation, and most of you already are, right? I think we don't make the assumption that that there are people out there that are listening to this and they're quick on Google looking up digital transformation because this is the first time they've ever heard of it. I think most people know about it and they're at least taking some limited steps toward it. But as I talked about earlier, I think the assumption, especially for smaller companies, smaller banks, credit unions, that though real enterprise level digital transformation initiatives are out of reach for them because it's too costly, takes too much time, takes too much expertise that they don't have. So actually, let me go back for a second, because what we didn't talk about on this slide is that there are a lot of different technologies that we could put under the umbrella of digital transformation. Really, every technology could be useful for digital transformation in some regards. For the purposes of this session, we're going to talk primarily about RPA, or robotic process automation, AI, or artificial intelligence, and BPM, or business process management. So these three technologies are combined usually to develop complete end-to-end business process automation. Sometimes you will hear the term used, hyper automation or intelligent automation or digital process automation. There's a lot of different terminology that can be used to describe combining these technologies to get to automation. And really what it's all about is just being able to take those tasks that we were talking about that are taking human time and making that automated so that that human time is freed up. Okay, so now let's look at specific processes that are great targets for this kind of automation that we're talking about. And let me just kind of back up for a second, because another thing digital transformation, as I talked about, means a lot of different things to different people. And so in a lot of cases, people are talking about digitization when they talk about digital digital transformation. So digitization really is just about trying to get rid of paper, right? And so maybe you've already had initiatives like this in your company where you have these processes that are very paper centric, and so you've brought in some systems to try to get rid of that paper trail so that everything is stored digitally instead. And that's a great step in the right direction. The next thing that follows on from that usually is digitalization, which is then making it so that all of your legacy papers are stored in a digital form as well. So that involves taking the unstructured data that's sitting on sheets of paper and documents and putting it in some digital form so that you can access that digitally. So those aren't things that we're going to be talking about in today's session, but those are kind of related. And an offshoot of that we could call digital intelligent document processing, which is another thing that will be enabled by the Nividus platform, which is what we're going to be talking about today. But we're not going to go into any great detail on that. So I just wanted to kind of give that backdrop before we go into these specifics, because I know that you may have heard some of these other terms before: digitization, digitalization, and maybe those are the things that are most important for you and maybe not, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage for that. So the processes that we're listing here on this page are ones that we have implemented in multiple organizations multiple times. And it's not as if you can take something that was built for another company from a customer onboarding perspective, let's say. Almost every company out there has the need to do some form of customer onboarding. And at a very high level, a lot of the steps are going to be the same, but the systems that you use and specific details might be different. And so we have, at Nividus, we've developed a lot of solutions around these spaces that make it easier for us to implement these kinds of things because we've done it so many times in the past. But it always is going to require some level of customization to work with your individual tools and processes that you have in-house. But these ones we're showing here, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just ones that we know are good candidates because we've done them so many times ourselves. And then the kinds of business benefits that you can look at when you implement solutions like that we saw on the previous pages, the things that you see here. And let me just talk about a few of them. Obviously, we've already talked to death about how this frees up your human resources to do higher value tasks. The other thing that it does that can be really important is it can reduce errors. It also, if you think about what we talked about earlier related to data, right? There's a lot of cases where you're not getting access to the data that you need or the data that you want to be able to effectively run your business. Well, building automations like this can unlock that data and bring it together in a single place so that it could be reported on more holistically. And that can be really helpful in terms of understanding a lot of nuances of your business that you can't get when you're looking at the data in silos, right? The other thing that it does is that your processes become instrumented. And what I mean by that is that processes that maybe were previously manual, or even if they were automated, but you didn't really have an audit trail or you didn't have any data being created, in a platform like the Nividus platform, you get for free a complete audit trail of every step of the process. So for each action that's taken, the system is going to track, okay, who was assigned that task? How long did it take for them to start work? How long did it take for them to finish work? And then, when it moved from that step to the next step in the process. And it will capture that level of information from end to end. And so you're going to have all this process data that can be combined with your existing business data that can give you some really great insights into how your business is being run. And you really get that for free. It doesn't take any additional work or effort or cost on your part to be able to create that data in this way when you come up with these kinds of automations. So just looking at this from a high level process standpoint, right? So yeah, you say, this sounds like a good idea, but you know, how can we do something like this? We don't really have a big IT department, or maybe we don't have an IT department at all, or maybe our IT department is all outsourced. I'm not really sure how we could get started with something like that. This this simple chart just kind of outlines the way that we work, and this is not, I'd say, the only way that you can do these kinds of projects, but we have a very high success rate in doing projects using this methodology. And so I'll just walk through it quickly for you. The first step is to kind of look at across your organization, what are the business processes that could be potential candidates for this kind of technology-based automation, and do a little bit of high-level research to allow you to prioritize them, so that you can figure out, hey, you know, we got these 10 different things here that we're looking at, but what are those things that are going to deliver the highest business benefit for the least amount of complexity from an implementation standpoint? And so that's what that discovery process is all about. And then once you get to the point where you have either one particular target or you have a short list for moving forward, you'll want to take the next step, which is, okay, for those ones that you're considering as candidate processes for automation, take a deeper dive into them and really understand what the ROI would be if you implement something like that, and just make sure that there are no showstoppers that were not uncovered in the previous step. And if so, you know, decide, okay, here's the candidate that we want to move forward with, and then move into the design phase where you really nail down the details of taking this particular use case and automating it within your organization. So an important part of this is, obviously up front, you want to understand what we call the as is state of the process. So you want to understand how things are currently working in the business, but you don't want to just stop there. You also want to be able to get to the point where you create a to-be process as well. So where you look at the existing process and identify, okay, for where we're going, you know, these steps are inefficiencies or maybe redundancies. You know, find cases where there is room for optimization in the process and identify that up front, so that you're not just automating essentially a broken process, but you can make those changes in all one pass. Now, there, in very large scale organizations or large scale changes, there might be a need to have an incremental approach to these changes where you don't want to change everything all at the same time. And that's something you really have to bounce off of the tolerance of your organization for change, because from the technology standpoint, it's very easy to implement a bunch of changes all at once, but you don't want to overwhelm your people by throwing a bunch of new things at them. So you have to really gauge what's going to be the best for your organization in terms of the pace to proceed. So in any case, you move from design then to the development step, which is where the real meat of the work happens, where the implementation is developed and you start seeing real results of it, the way we do this is in a very iterative and customer involved way where you're able to see the development as it's happening so that you're able to provide feedback on it rather than, you know, you probably have heard this term waterfall before, where everything is developed all at once and then you just see the end result and then it doesn't give you much opportunity to make changes along the way. So we try to avoid that by having some iterative development where you're going to be able to see what's happening as it's happening till you get to the point where you're able to put that off in production, it's running, and then from there we talk about how to scale it, right? And scaling can happen in a couple of different directions. One is scaling of that process itself. You know, sometimes you might limit a rollout based on geography or the number of people or the number of transactions, that kind of thing. But then also you can talk about scaling from the standpoint of what are the other pieces of this that we're going to address, right? If you look at it from a high level, each business process that you have within your organization, there might be 20 steps in it. And when you start, all 20 of them might be manual processes, but you might realize right out of the gate that, you know, about half of those, 10 of the 20 are good candidates for automation. And so, you know, 10 of the 20 good candidates for automation, but you don't want to have that level of change immediately. So you're just going to initially implement 2, right? And so then over time, you will grow that to the point where, you know, all 10 of those steps that can be automated will be automated. And the reality is over time, the amount of things that you can automate using this technology is growing as artificial intelligence technology gets better. So we won't talk about that in any detail in this session, but we do have other webinars that we've done in the past where we go into more detail on why that's the case. And if you have any additional questions about that, just let us know and we'll be happy to give you some answers. So now let's just look at a few case studies about some banking customers that we have already worked with and the things that we have done with them that have made a real difference for their business. And we're not going to go in any great detail on these. Obviously, we don't have a ton of time. So as we look through these, if any of them resonate with you and you're interested in learning more about it or understanding how it could apply in your setting, just reach out to us and let us know. We'd be happy to go through this with you. We can also do a demo for you to show you how the technology works in more detail and how it might be appropriate in your organization. So this first one is a bank reconciliation process. And obviously within a bank, there's tons of reconciliation processes. This is one example where they had a manual process of creating these bank reconciliation statements each day. They used a lot of different spreadsheets, and it required a bunch of manual work to get everything matched up correctly so that these reports could be created. And this is exactly the kind of task that that the RPA technology is very good at, because bots can easily compare one piece of data to another piece and report on any discrepancies and do it all very quickly and with no errors. And so in this case, we were able to automate 85% of the processes for a 95% improvement in the accuracy and reduce the manual work required for this task by 70%. Okay, here's invoice processing for a bank. Obviously, invoice processing is something that applies pretty much across the board for every kind of business, and we have done this in many different verticals. And this is one of the solutions I would say we've spent the most time to develop. One of the reasons why this is such a manual process usually for companies is that you don't have any control over how you receive invoices, right? Your vendors that you're working with, they create invoices the way they create them, and they're not going to change the format of their invoice to suit your needs. So you have to figure out a way to deal with it. And usually that's impossible or overwhelming, right? And so the beauty of systems like this and a platform like the Nivitas platform is that you can train it, and in fact, for most things, it will work out of the box, that it will understand for your invoice what are the key fields that need to be extracted for you to be able to process those invoices. So this particular case here contains some of the things that we see as problems with other systems that are designed to process invoices, because let's be honest, there's no shortage of systems out there that will say that they can do invoice processing. But where you see problems is around the edges of those kinds of solutions, because they will work very well within a well-defined space or well-defined set of data. When you go outside of that is where things start breaking down. So in cases where you have multi-page documents, or the formatting is changing from page to page, or over time the formats are shifting based on the way it's being reported by the vendor, and all of those kinds of situations can be easily accounted for in the Nivitas platform because of the artificial intelligence technology that we're using. It's able to kind of learn as it goes, and it makes it possible to process these invoices with very little human involvement. And you can see in this case, we had over 90% accuracy, 75% reduction in time, and 80% overall process automation. All right, let's tackle one more here. This is for a wealth management firm. We've done a good amount of work within the wealth management space, and I know for some of the smaller specialty banks, this might not be that big of a thing, but you might see how this kind of solution could apply to other things that you do as well. So in this case, we were trying to generate portfolio reports using a bunch of external data sources, websites, legacy apps, emails, and other customer communications. And the bots were able to bring all of that data together into a single report in a way that was much, much faster than a human could do it. And this eliminated a huge amount of manual work, 1,200 man hours saved, a 60% increase in productivity, and overall 70% improvement in cycle time. So these are the kinds of manual tasks that the Nivitas platform can automate for you. And as I said earlier, the assumption that many of you would make is that, this all sounds good, but I think this kind of technology is out of reach for us. We're too small. We can't afford that kind of thing. And I can tell you that we're dealing with organizations that are sometimes in the single millions of dollars of revenue, and they're able to justify the expense for implementing these solutions. And then the other great thing about this is that typically these solutions can be implemented within a matter of weeks. And we also have some very low cost, low risk ways for you to proceed if you want to just try them out. So I'd encourage you to reach out to us and ask us for more information, more details about how this could work for your organization, and we'd be happy to give those to you. So I apologize, I've taken up all the time, but Kayla, let me turn it over to you to finish things up today.
Thank you, Alan, for a great session, and thank you, guests, for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we hope that you all got valuable insights. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. And just as a reminder, we will be sending out a recording of this session along with the slides. And if you have more interesting webinars lined up, you can visit our website, nivitas.com, to get the update. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.